All right, this is the second module of the ADU Wizard Kitsap County, Washington course. And in this module, we are going to dive deep into the basics of the attached accessory dwelling unit code. We're going to continue, as the example from the first module, the same piece of property, so we can just stay right on those same topics. And we're going to jump right into the land and location, and then the rural protection zoning that we clicked here, and then expanding the residential uses tab here to see accessory dwelling unit attached. That's what this module is about. The first thing we're going to want to do is look at the definition of what that means. And clicking that link will take you right to the section of code 17.110.017, exactly what it means. So, accessory dwelling unit attached means a separate dwelling unit contained within or directly connected by a minimum of 4 feet to the habitable space of the primary residence. Alternative configurations shall not be allowed as an accessory dwelling unit attached. So, what does that mean? A minimum of 4 feet of habitable space. What that means is it cannot be separated by like a garage. A garage typically is unheated and unconditioned space, so that is not habitable space. And so, if you were to put the ADU on the other side of a garage, it would be technically detached and not attached because it's not sharing 4 feet of habitable space of a wall. There is a very nice flyer that they have as well that goes over some of the definitions as well, and some examples of what attached and detached look like. I'll include this link in the description of this module as well, so you can look at it in more in depth and print it out yourself if you want to. But 4 feet of habitable space, so that's really what that comes down to, and that does not mean a covered walkway. It does not mean a hallway and a second floor, but it's got to be, and you'll want to check with the actual building department and the other departments who will do the permitting for this as well. But what I understand it to mean is it's got to be directly connected by 4 feet of habitable space, a shared common wall. And that's the definition. If you want to get down the rabbit hole, you're going to want to have conversations with the county about that. But that's the definition in their code. Now, what else we need to look at in this section, right, are the categorical use standards for attached accessory dwelling units. And you can see here there's two. There's inside of an urban growth area and outside of an urban growth area. The example we used from the first module is rural protected unincorporated rule. So that is not inside an urban growth area. So we will look at that, but we'll look at this one too, because your piece of property might actually be located in an urban growth area. So let's just click that and go right to it. And we're just going to go right through it and read through the whole thing. And I'll go step by step and explain as best I can my understanding of what this means. So this is inside an urban growth area, 17.415.010. To encourage the provisions of affordable housing and accessory dwelling unit ADU located in an urban growth area UGA shall meet the following criteria. So this is where it comes down to your building permit, right? Because you have a permitted use, and here's how you make sure your permit will meet all the qualifications for having that building permit approved. The number. Now, this is the very interesting part that I think is really exciting. The number of ADUs attached or detailed shall not exceed 2 per lot. Now, this is only if you're in an urban growth area. Okay, so if you look at your parcel and its jurisdiction is unincorporated rule, you are not in an urban growth area. An urban growth area, you would say the name of it: Bremerton, Port Orchard, Poulsbo, urban growth area. And we'll look at some examples of that in a minute, but you have to make sure that you're actually in an urban growth area to have this part of the code apply. If you're outside of an urban growth area, then this section of the code would apply. But let's just go through this, and then we'll get to that section in a moment. That's really what you want to find out when you're looking at your code and your zoning. Are you in the urban growth area? Are you outside of the urban growth area? Because you have to know which part of the code applies so you can design your project according to the code. Location. An ADU shall be located not to preclude future subdivisions of the lot to meet the minimum density for the zone. Again, that's only if you're in an urban growth area. In this particular case, our example, the minimum density is 1 per 10 acres. We're not going to have to worry about that on this piece of property that we're using as our example. Access. Access to the lot shall use the same entrance as the primary residence unless Kitsap County Code allows for multiple access points to the lot for the single-family home dwelling. What does that mean? You got to use the same driveway. It cannot have a separate entrance. Water. The ADU shall comply with regulations that govern water provisions, either city water or if you're on a well, you got to get your approval through the Kitsap Health District. Same thing with sewage. The ADU shall provide an urban level of sanitary service, sewer service, if you're in an urban growth area. And if there's a sewer hookup, you got to have that hooked up. Again, that's all done through the Kitsap Health District. So for any development for the water and sewer, the Kitsap Health District has to sign off on your plans and give you an approval letter. And that approval letter is going to be part of your application for your building permit for your accessory dwelling unit. Design standards. Unless otherwise noted in this section, an ADU shall meet the design standards of the underlying zone and design districts. So in this example, there's no design districts. It's just the rule designation. The size. This is a very important thing for most people. Dimensions are determined by interior measurements. Very important, this part, I think, because you could have an ADU and then have a covered porch. And because the covered porch is not conditioned interior living space, that does not count towards the ADU size. Might be nice to have. An ADU shall not exceed 1,000 square feet or 60% of the habitable area of the primary dwelling, whichever is smaller. So what does that mean? So accessory dwelling units are just that. They're accessory to a primary home. The primary home is going to be a certain square footage. If either the 60% of that primary square footage or 1,000 square feet is smaller, then that is the limitations for the size of the accessory dwelling unit in an urban growth area. Now, the director may allow equal square footage to the primary dwelling and the ADU if the ADU is located completely on a single floor of the existing residence. So, in the example of the flyer here, the upstairs or the basement, right? So, something to keep in mind. Parking. The site shall comply with Chapter 17.490 for off-street parking. So you'll want to review that to see what kind of parking requirements you need. But a single ADU on a lot is not required to provide additional off-street parking. In Chapter 17.490, off-street parking and loading if one of the following criteria is met. The primary dwelling unit meets all parking requirements, or on-street parking is available, or the ADU is within 1/4 mile of a transit stop. So if you meet one of those criteria in an urban growth area, then you don't need to meet the requirements of parking for 17.490. You're going to want to make sure that if that's the case, that you call that out in your submissions for your building permit, so that way they know how to review parking and that you're taking one of these instead of providing parking. In this case, the second ADU shall provide one off-street parking space in addition to that which is required for the primary dwelling unit. So in the case of an urban growth area, an accessory dwelling unit, and you have 2 ADUs, if you're putting the second one on, you got to have that additional parking. Additional standards. An ADU shall provide urban services and comply with the provisions of Kitsap County Code, including but not limited to setbacks, height, and lot coverage. Perfect. We'll cover that in just a second. An existing unpermitted ADU shall acquire a permit through the provisions of the chapter. So that's only if you have one and it's not permitted and it's just been there forever. We're not really going to go over that because there's a lot of hoops to go through. As far as I know, this is just going to be, if this is the case, what you're going to want to do is work directly with the county to know how to best resolve it permit wise to get it permitted. But this one, additional standards, shall meet the setbacks, height, and lot coverage. Well, where do you find that at? Well, you find that right on that quick reference guide page, the section that we had with all of the residential uses. And you'll notice right at the bottom, the last one says density, dimensions, and design. And if we expand that, we'll have a bunch of information about size requirements for the lot, height requirements, 35 feet. It's about 2 stories. Lot coverage and setbacks. And so you have your front setbacks, and you have your side setbacks, and your rear setbacks. An important thing to note here, a couple things actually. Front setback, that's from where you access your property, right? It's not how your house is situated on the property, but where does the driveway enter your parcel at? That is considered your front. Generally, it's considered your front. Sides and rear, 20 feet, 5 feet for accessory structures. Rear, 20 feet, 5 feet for accessory structures. Now, the thing to make sure you understand about this part is because the accessory dwelling unit is going to be a habited building, it has to meet the full 20 foot. Even though it's an accessory dwelling unit, it's not an accessory structure. An accessory structure is like a shed or something like that that's not going to have water and heat and power and all those things. Well, it might have power, but it's not going to be a habitable structure. The accessory dwelling units, as far as I know, have to meet the full setbacks. Important thing to note here is footnote 42B. And this is across the board for any zone that you're in. Footnote 42B. Following exceptions apply to historic lots. Any single-family residential lot of record is defined in this chapter 17.110 that has a smaller width or lot depth than is required by this title or is less than 1 acre, may use that residential zoning classification that most closely corresponds to the dimensions of the lot of record for the purpose of establishing setbacks from the property lines. What does that mean? Well, if that means, for instance, in this case, the minimum lot size is 10 acres, if the parcel that we were looking at, well, actually, that doesn't matter because the footnote 42B says that width and depth or is less than 1 acre. So if you had a parcel and it was less than 1 acre, or it was more than 1 acre, but it didn't meet the 140 feet of width or 140 feet of depth, then you could use reduced setbacks. Typically what those are, you'll have to check with the county, but typically that 50 front goes down to 20, the rear goes down to 10, and the side goes down to 5. But that's only if it's applicable for your piece of property, and you can qualify for using footnote 42B to get that reduced setback. Otherwise, you got to meet the full setbacks. Now let's look at accessory dwelling units outside of an urban growth area, right? In order to encourage the provisions of affordable housing, an accessory dwelling unit ADU attached located outside of an urban growth area may be located in the residential zones subject to the following criteria. And you do have to make sure you meet all of this criteria. As far as I can tell, they don't say, oh, sure, you can miss that one and not hit it. You do have to hit them all. An ADU attached shall be located within an owner-occupied primary residence. Basically, what that means is the owner has to occupy the either primary residence or that accessory dwelling unit. ADUs attached are limited in size to no greater than 50% of the habitable area of the primary residence. So if you have that's pretty self-explanatory. It's 50%, can't be larger than that. The ADU attached is subject to applicable health district standards for water and sewer disposal. Again, the Kitsap Health District, and I'll put a link in the description below, needs to look at your plans and approve them, and you need to use that approval from them as part of your building application for your accessory dwelling unit. If you don't have it, you'll probably get it sent back to you and say, hey, you need to get this. Here's the thing about outside of an urban growth area, only one ADU attached shall be allowed per lot. So if you're outside of an urban growth area, you're only allowed one attached accessory dwelling unit. ADUs attached are to provide additional off-street parking with no additional side street entrance. What that means, again, is you have to use the same driveway to get to the ADU, and you have to provide that additional off-street parking. Typically, off-streat parking, at least in the parking code that I've read, that you have to have that spot. It's got to be a 9 foot by 20 foot parking space called out on your site plan for that parking for that accessory dwelling unit. ADUs attached are not allowed where an accessory dwelling unit exists. Okay. So if you already have one, you don't get another one. ADUs attached are not allowed where an accessory dwelling unit exists. And 7, again, it goes into the unpermitted one. If you have that situation, you're going to want to work with the county. This training does not go over that. We're just talking about the code for how to go about getting the information you need for applying for an attached ADU, not about the already existing ones that you may have there. And that's the basics of the attached ADU code. So when you're designing your plan and you're finding your zone and you find out that you're in this example, rural protected, not in an urban growth area, you go to that section and you start making your plans based all on that section there, because that is what applies for your project. And isn't that nice to know? You kind of have a really good idea of like what are all the things you need to do to make sure that your project gets approved. And you can try to not follow these, but you're probably not going to get it approved unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstances, which may be the case. And if that is, you want to work with the county to check with them. But typically, you're going to want to make sure you get all of these done and make sure that you meet them. So your project, your site plan, your submissions, all of it, check all these boxes, and then you'll get your permit probably faster, because there'll be less back and forth because you've already ticked all the boxes and you made sure you hit every one of these sections of the code. All right. And now that you know where to find it, you can reference it. I'll put the link in the description for the flyer, for the code, and that's it. And then the next section, we're going to go over detached ADU code.